How do we move through games? Above all else, movement seems to be the most common element across this medium as a whole because you're always moving in some way. In the past, it's just been about getting you from point A to point B. Walk, drive, fly, whatever it was. It was there for the sake of progression, and that's pretty much it. But in the last few years, I've noticed a bit of a change. There's been a bigger range of how movement is utilized. Sure, there have been bumps along the way, but it's worth discussing how movement has evolved over the years. And I'll get this out of the way now that this idea was sparked by Sunset Overdrive, and this may just be an elaborate excuse to talk about how good that game is, but whatever, go with it.
Hey, it's me, Fizzy! Trespassing and destruction of property is a serious crime! Get ready to die, asshole!
I think movement is the biggest element that creates that interaction and separates games from other media. And some of the most famous and most played games of earlier days were platformers, a genre entirely based on your proficiency of movement. But those games are entirely about movement. How do games that include other mechanics integrate movement, and how has that been evolving over time? I want to look at a few games that have shown interesting ideas regarding movement, and the most common avenue I see for integrating movement into games is by combining it with combat. So let's examine a few games that have succeeded and failed in their experiments. Let's look at a franchise like Halo. Halo is a first-person shooter where movement is used entirely to get you from point A to point B, but it's given a little variety in how that's done. And driving around in vehicles like the Warthog is really... damn it. Fun. Now, this doesn't make Halo a bad game at all. Its main focus is the shooting, and that's a lot of fun. But I do think Halo is a bit underrealized in how they utilize their movement. Whenever I think of my favorite moment across the entire Halo franchise, I remember the spectacular final chapter of the first game. It changes from a shooter to a get the hell out as fast as possible. We've learned how to use vehicles throughout the whole game before, but it's never been like this. Now there's a countdown until our destruction. Using vehicles was always fun in the game because of the variety they offered. They let you move faster, they gave you different combat options, but now they're being used for this sort of boss fight with the world around you. It's nothing like anything else in the game, since there's a serious threat of failure that's dependent on your proficiency of driving. All because of that countdown. And more experiments with movement like this would have been great. And now compare that to how Halo 2 ended with a combat-based boss fight. Halo 2 does have a vehicle section in its last mission, but it's not a change of pace or anything special really. It's even an escort mission for a part of it. And the finale of it all is a combat-based boss fight, which I can only describe as the opposite of fun. Wait for Sniper to shoot him, which is totally out of your control, then attack. Repeat, repeat, cue cutscene. Movement's cool, and we know that there can be awesome uses of it in this franchise, but they didn't take advantage of that as much as they could have. Alright, that's just one example of a shooter-movement combination. What else is there? Well, right before I get into the next example, I'll say that there's an easy checklist I have to determine whether or not I'll buy a game. I buy it. This is why I'm one of the 12 or so people that got Bionic Commando on day one. I'll say now, Bionic Commando isn't a good game, but it's definitely worth examining here. The swinging is amazing, but, well, the combat isn't exactly great. But what's important to look at from Bionic Commando is how the movement and combat aren't made to work together.
Over there!
The swinging is fantastic and is easily the best part of the game. It works well and feels good to use. The environments you're given to work with it are poorly designed, but the mechanic itself is really fun. I wish they tried to mesh that great movement with the combat a little more than not at all. First off, the shooting on its own isn't good. There's no weight to the weapons, and that makes it feel unresponsive. Not to mention the most unintentionally hilarious pea shooter in games. I will say there are cool moves like grappling onto an enemy and then zipping towards them and kicking them in the chest, but the vast majority of your time in combat will be spent walking around on the ground trying to shoot. And it's impossible to shoot while swinging.
Joe, I just saw something. I think it was the name of a terrorist organization.
It's not an easy task to combine movement and combat in a satisfying way, and Bionic Commando is a really good example of not only one mechanic being much better than the other, but also how they aren't designed to work together. Can I talk about Sunset Overdrive yet? One more example. And I will say there is another reason I want to do this video, so I could talk about Mirror's Edge more, and if you know me at all, you know that I love Mirror's Edge. I'll say now, the combat in Mirror's Edge is also kind of crap. So how can I love Mirror's Edge, a game with great movement and subpar combat, while griefing Bionic Commando for essentially the same thing? And that would be because Mirror's Edge's use of combat, for the most part, thematically matches the rest of the game.
Take those snipers out or keep out of their way. Just get your ass through there.
Mirror's Edge, you're a runner, so when it comes to things you should be good at, it's pretty clear what's most important. This is what's supposed to feel good. This isn't. I will say I do enjoy some of the hand-to-hand combat. It sure slows you down, which isn't fun, but running up to an enemy and jump kicking them feels great. But then there are the guns. The guns feel like crap too. And I also like that. I don't want to shoot them because the game, with a few exceptions like the last stage, is mostly designed around running instead of fighting. But really, the last stage completely throws this notion away. It's fun making the soldiers shoot out their own security system, but you can't progress to the final bit of the game without getting past this guy, the beefiest enemy in the whole game who sits in the middle of 3 paths that give you no cover and no way to avoid his bullets. And here we see another game nail the movement. Like, really, the sense of momentum and speed in this game is brilliant. But in combining the movement and the combat, as well as the scenarios that you have to use it in, it sometimes falls short. But leave all that other whack-ass shit behind, it's time to talk about Sunset Overdrive. I don't think there's a game that combines movement and combat better than Sunset Overdrive. First off, the movement on its own is spectacular. Just about every piece of architecture in the enormous Sunset City can be used to keep moving. The floor is lava in this game. See, there's an achievement for it. And it says it in the loading screen too.
If you don't stop moving, I'm gonna get really angry.
Bounce through the air, grind on rails, wall run to connect the gap, anything to keep that combo building. And when I say the floor is lava, that goes for combat too. If you simply stroll around on the ground, you'll die in a fight real fast. So you're forced to move. That's the only way you can survive these fights. It's your biggest advantage over all the enemies in the game, and you have no choice but to use it. And the reason the shooting works in Sunset Overdrive is because of a very generous auto-aim system, something that would have been very welcome in Bionic Commando. And the figurative hand-holding that this auto-aiming does is perfectly fine because it lets you focus on moving more than the accuracy of your own shots, and that way the shooting is still satisfying. As the combo meter builds up, it will unlock movement augmentations, like causing explosions after you bounce on an object, electrical grinding, and even an energy ball roll. And your weapons get augmentations too, like having the chance to cause an atomic explosion or summoning the Grim Reaper to help you kill stuff. And then depending on how you play, the overdrives buff up things like damage done to certain enemies and combo points generated from certain actions like grinding. So if you grind a lot in fights, you'll earn medals that can be used to specifically increase either your combo points generated or buff your damage to enemies while grinding. There's so many options to maneuver around each encounter, and the movement and combat augment each other damn near perfectly for this.
Hey, you know what sounds like fun? If you stop moving for a second, yeah.
And I've only been focusing on movement and how it works with combat so far, but that's only one way that movement interacts with another element of a game. Recently, there have been really interesting uses of movement in games. Games like PT and Gone Home only have movement and limited ways to interact with the environment around you. PT uses slow and weighty steps to build up tension, which you can find out more about here, and Gone Home is all about exploration to build the story, which is done by walking around and looking at different objects in this house. And the way you move through both of these games is, at its core, just to progress you through, but the way they're executed is really different. And these sort of games are sometimes deemed as walking simulators, and yes, all you do is walk, but it's what the walking does for the experience. What does it lead to? All you freaking do in PT is walk forward, and it's the scariest game I've ever played. All you do in Gone Home is walk around a house, and there's a great story about familial struggles. And movement's even branching out as far as comedy in games like OCTODAD. Movement's evolving, and I think we're still at the beginning of this evolution despite the range of its usage in today's games. Just remember that when you make a game, you make the rules for that world. You don't have to conform to any set ideas. Go crazy. be creative, and make the journey as fun as reaching the destination.